Yeah, so this is Contentful and TypeScript. I put a very romantic tagline there, a real life opinionated walkthrough, which is kind of what happened before this talk. Um, so another intro and like more fancy wording, like best CMS meets a language extension. I think more people may know about TypeScript, which is an extension for JavaScript. It comes from Microsoft. I've got this from TypeScript website. Well, it says like JavaScript at any scale, and it's basically type JavaScript, and they promote like this way you can save time, you can handle errors, you are preventing like these kind of situations where JavaScript will allow you to have the like pure uh, on type code, and you can run this on any platform because you can actually transpile TypeScript code for different platforms using their tooling. Well, this is me. I consider JavaScript code that's written with TypeScript like more reliable and more robust. And also, I usually say like it makes more sense. So you can trust because does the job. So basically, in medium-sized projects, I try to include TypeScript as much as possible, or mostly projects where it's going to interact with different parts, different components. And Contentful, we all know about it, and the same. I got this from the website, market-leading content platform for enterprises. Um, we know about it, and here I always say like it's developer friendly, editing experience friendly, and also engineering friendly. Why this? Well, because it has multiple SDKs for the APIs, which are pretty good documented. Also, their interface can be extended via the app framework, and you are free to host contentful based applications anywhere in different type of services, either Jamstack or even like more complex platform as services. So why to speak about this or how this talk idea began? Well, I'm working on a blog migration, which is actually next based, should run on a platform, actually on particularly AWS. And after I think 2 years on this blog, I wanted to use types. Also, one big reason was because a front-end developer who was new to the project is helping with that, and I needed to offer him something that he could understand in both. I mean, he has designs, but I also wanted this developer to understand what the blog rules were, and kind of abstract the way that the content model is looking, and just have this help focusing on front-end components mostly. Well, particularly the data comes from the GraphQL built-in API from Contentful. I want the types, and I mentioned actually I sent a direct message to Stefan, who's always there, very friendly and helping. And I said like, hey Stefan, do you know how I can have types from Contentful? I'm using the GraphQL API, and he said, I don't know, but if you find something, let me know. And he wished me luck, but he was very supportive too. And well, I first found a couple projects which will allow me to export a content model to, well, a series of types, TypeScript types and interfaces, just exactly as the content model looks like. But I was using GraphQL queries, and these queries actually belong to particular either pages, queries, components, or particularly some cases where I need to fetch data. And I did my research. So, well, some intro. Maybe I should have begun with this first. I'm pretty into software development. I really love much backend. platform as services, AWS, GCP, and other clouds. I met Contentful in 2017, and for different projects I've been involved with, that's actually how I arrived at this new project, the block migration. And also, I'm all very related and familiar with JavaScript and Node in general. I come from Mexico, and I wanted to share some images, not just food, but different uh, landscapes for the buildings and food and different cities that we have in my country. I'm a proud Mexican. And so TypeScript again, what's my relationship with TypeScript and what's my experience? Mostly, I've been using TypeScript as an aid for development and as a guideline for a good design. So usually I try to define resources in my application and services that's design. Let's imagine or compare that to a content model, to a content type, for example. In my application, I try to early set some types or interfaces for them. Also, I noticed a long time that as much as I was using these types, subsequent development would be easier. So new scripts or new modules, new components, whatever the platform is, either just command line, either node scripts or front-end components, it would be easier to connect stuff. So I would say that interoperability. And also, I think it was my first experience with TypeScript. I use it to mimic the webhook responses from services. Actually, when I had services and I had to handle webhook or incoming webhooks, by having types, I would make sure I was actually dealing in a good way with the data that I had to manipulate or store or any processing. So that's consistency. And in the case of this block migration, the components or well development experience or the resources that we had at our hands for work were Figma designs, basically a set of Figma where they say, okay, we need this block to look in this new fashion. We already had an existing content model and a lot of data there. And I had to define some queries and, of course, types. Then I proposed to this developer, like, why don't we use stories to present the different cases? So we just focus on particularly design and how stuff should look like, interactions, and I try to abstract all complexity for how data is being fetched. And again, I wanted types, and I wonder if this was possible. So as we know, GraphQL queries and GraphQL relies on a schema. So that sounded like types were or actually are likely possible. But okay, it's possible. How can I do that? What's the around that I can use? I had found something for the pure content model, and that was working good. I will show that in some minutes. But I wanted to export my queries. So, well, after some research and some tries, uh, now I know that Apollo has tooling that's perfect for it. Actually, it's very, very easy to work with that. I think Apollo is like a leader in the market for GraphQL. I mean, they're Apollo, and they offer a command line, or actually they offer some libraries, and you can use those as command line tools with npm or npx to both fetch the schema and even export any queries that you have as a series of types or interfaces. Like I say here, those tools work for validating schema, Well, this is actually from Apollo. It has tools for validating schema, linting operations, and generally everything which is GraphQL related. I think Apollo is very reliable and it's very consistent. They're big ones. I can show in some minutes how this work in command line. Well, discuss with it, and I think now it's a good time to to show how stuff works. So now let's see, for people who's kind of new to Contentful, what a content model looks like in this case. And let's imagine a very, very simple example. This is maybe like a starter. And we have the case for a recipe, which consists of some steps to build some food, to cook some food. And we also have ingredients. So ingredients have a name, a flavor, and a unit. The same for a recipe. You can mention like the name, when you are gonna eat this food. You can have a picture for that, a teaser, like, okay, tell me about it, make me hungry. So you can have a description for the recipe and a list of ingredients, and finally the series of steps to cook this recipe. As ingredients, I wanted to have as an example, well, ingredients for Mexican food, which is coriander, sauce, salsa, avocado, beans, tomato, cheese, tortillas. So those are pretty famous. And as recipe, I wanted to go away from the stereotype of tacos and put something which is pretty Mexican, but not so famous. So we have chilaquiles. This is, I mean, you failed as a Mexican if you don't know chilaquiles. So you usually have this during breakfast. There goes a picture for that. A teaser, well, it's a traditional Mexican breakfast dish consisting of corn tortillas. And we have the other fields for that. There you can see the ingredients and steps. Actually, this morning during the Europe version of the show, someone had an extension for food recipes. That was fun. And if we want to fetch data for this, for example, we want to see ingredients, we can do that through an exposed GraphQL app that Contentful offers. You just need to make sure you compose this URL, passing the right space and a preview access token. This is a read token, so it's kind of safe. And you can start defining GraphQL queries here. And this is actually very simple. So we can see what ingredients we have there. We are fetching the ID, name, flavor. So sauce can be either bitter salad or spicy, avocado salad. I thought that much Mexican foods are very salad, bitter maybe. So, well, if people want to know how to have this at their reach for their contentful space, they need to make sure to find API keys at settings. They click API keys. By default, they have an example key. There you have the space ID, which is basically, let's see that as your generally account ID. And they have a delivery API access token and a preview access token. So preview, well, delivery is everything which is published already. And preview is anything that hasn't been published or versions which were changed but not published yet. Okay, so what if we want to have this particular case? For example, an ingredient with an ID, the name, and the flavor as an interface, and we need to use that for whatever purpose we have. Can be either scripts on command line, can be either any what can be like webhooks or export that to other service or React components can be, which was the case for this. So I mentioned Apollo. In this case, I particularly had my queries here, which I wrote before. This is a normal text file. Well, it's a GraphQL extension file, which with my queries, I delete the types folder. So the Apollo tooling, and I think now it's wise to, well, I will execute this.
Hey, Diego, would you be able to bump up the font on that?
Yeah, because I have a big screen and I use this. Okay.
Thanks very much.
Tell me.
Keep going, like maybe 4 or 5 more, real big.
My God. Okay.
I would do maybe 1 or 2 more, and then we should be good. Yeah, that looks great. Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's fine. I have a white screen, so didn't think about it. Okay, so let's see. I have a folder here. Let's start again. And I have a queries GraphQL extension file, which is basically a copy of what I was showing on, well, from GraphQL. There are GraphQL queries. And in this case, I will use Apollo. I will use npx because I don't have a package.json. For those who don't know npx, this is a way to either fetch npm modules from their from the registry. I think you can use other registries too, but well, or you can run stuff as scripts with npx, which are included in the package JSON and local modules, I think. So let's start again. But if we want to not just generate types, but have an idea or fetch the schema from GraphQL. So we have this option. To download the schema, we need to pass as parameters the endpoint, which is basically the URL that I mentioned before. That's going to be used on GraphQL, and just the name for the schema file. So this is like voila, it's just execute. Let's see what we got here. This is schema.json. It's a huge file with the schema. For those who want to know more, what's making this possible is introspection from GraphQL. And actually, that's how GraphQL or any GraphQL client can have an idea on what's possible to fetch or how it can interact. But now let's go to a more fun part, which is actually generating types for this, which is kind of the same. I'm gonna do something different here. But in this case, we are gonna use the client code gen command from the Apollo tooling. So let's see how it goes. And it says, you need a target here, and just tell me the code generator that you want to use. And it says Swift, TypeScript, Flow, Scala, JSON. Well, I mean, it has Swift and Scala, JSON, so it's not just TypeScript. So there's no excuse to avoid using this approach to build stuff. It won't be just restricted to TypeScript. Now let's do that again. We just executed that, but now passing what the target is, which is TypeScript. And now we have a types folder. Let's see what's there. And well, now we have this. Now we have all the types, which is actually interfaces for all queries. And what's important here is that this is not our content model, or it's all queries are respecting what our content model aligns to. So it's actually the type of query that we need to build. That's the actual interface and the actual type that it's gonna use for that. So that's for Apollo. I think it's pretty simple, actually. Well, that was some show. There's also tooling for Hasura. Well, that I can show here. I think this is more related to running your own Hasura instance there, or using Hasura. It's more verbose. Also, I think it goes more for configuration. I would say that, and still can be run as a script or a command line stuff. But I skipped that for a demo. I just found the Apollo option way more straightforward. There's also this tool, GraphQL Code Generator. They have their own tool for building that, and they have other options too. It's not just TypeScript. I think you can build for other language extensions or even languages. And also, well, let's go back again to the situation where it's not exactly GraphQL queries, but the actual content model. Is that possible? Yeah, that's actually how I started trying this out. I found this repository. I think it comes from Intercom GitHub organization. It works very good. I use that. You just need to use their library as a command line thing, well, as a script, and pass management token and space ID and some keys like that. And it's going to export a set of interfaces where entry is the main type, and it is extended by interfaces of fields and content types. That works very good. And also, and I think this is recent, Marco from Contentful built this content type generator app, which is based on the app framework, which is 2 years old now. And it can be used from its Netlify hosted version. You don't need to code or even config. And I just test that out recently, and it works really good. I can show that in, well, right now. This is the app that I'm mentioning. Well, it's this one, sorry. This is the repository. We can share links afterwards. And it's hosted on Netlify, so we can use that to install it in our space, and it will generate types for our content model. So this actually surprised me in a good way. So also the truth is that I wrote interfaces by hand first. Like I wrote my query, and well, I defined also even like my content types. I copied some over, but then I just made my simplified version, and wrote interfaces by hand, like with TypeScript. I was fine with that. Now I know there are better ways to do that, and this is working good. We exported those interfaces and put those as the signature for components on Storybook, and it's working slick. And okay, there maybe people say, okay, it's nice, but why, when, and where to use types with contentful data? Maybe for a demo or a very small landing page may not make sense. When is some data, even for a blog or a bigger space, and you need to deal with that content, with that data, and do migrations, you need to export, import from services. I think types are going to help a lot. They are going to be very useful, and they will offer you a more safe experience while developing. And now I can share some lessons. So someone had typical, someone had the same problem you have. This is for both being humble and against the ego, like you are not the only, you are not alone either. Just look around in documentation from tools, see what toolings they're around. I always thought that GitHub issues had a lot of these experiences, and you need to know how to abstract your situation and Google that. And potentially any GitHub issue that is related is going to tell you what to do or what not to do. Other lesson is aim for simplicity. I remember this from Laravel, it's convention over configuration. So just look for one tool that will help you. Don't try to reinvent, not that much. Try out and test that early. And just try to add stuff as it's really required. That's ask for help. The reason why I'm speaking now is because I asked Stefan, like, hey, do you know how to do this? And also, I shared my code base with the developer from the project, and he said, hey, there's a way to do that with Apollo. And I look around and I found stuff, and now I'm talking here. And that's the last lesson for this experience. And I think that's it. I'm happy to listen to questions and share more if there's any questions from the chat.